I'm Colleen Taylor with TechCrunch TV, here with Ray Kurzweil.
My pleasure to be with you.
And we're here at South by Southwest in your library. So this is your first time at South by Southwest. What do you think?
It's tremendous entrepreneurial energy and energy of all kinds. It's a fun group. It's young. And there's a lot of innovation here, lots of ideas. And that's what gets us from here to there in terms of my law of accelerating returns.
And is there ever any time that you think that maybe there's misspent energy with young entrepreneurs? What do you think of sort of the app landscape and these things, that you're seeing here that people are working on?
Well, it's always the case that only a very small fraction of companies and ideas succeed. Which is okay. I think we see people doing innovation today with fewer and fewer resources. So, I mean, we've already seen, a kid in his 20s can start Facebook or Google or Groupon or any of these other innovations. You've got teenagers now. Tavi Gevinson rocks the world of fashion at age 14, and there's many other examples. I'm mentoring a young woman, Laura Deming, who's got a cure for Alzheimer's and is closing on a fund with participation by Peter Thiel, the venture capitalist behind Facebook. So there's lots of innovation by young people because you don't have to have huge resources anymore. You don't have to be a big company or a big research agency to do world-changing technology and to get your message and your product out to the world's market.
Do you still think it's important to go to these higher universities? I mean, you mentioned Peter Thiel and these young people. Tavi Gevinson has obviously not gone to college yet, but she's had a lot of success. And I know you've had a lot of success in academia. I mean, you went to MIT, all of these things. But is the world changing in this way?
Well, I think we need to change education. I think it's unfortunate that so many of these examples, Bill Gates and Zuckerberg and Larry Page, dropped out of his PhD program to start Google. We need to change education. We're following a 19th century model of stuffing facts into kids' minds. They need to actually know how to solve the world's problems. And it's never too early to address those. Young people have the tools, and older people too. I mean, the tools of innovation have been democratized, and I think we should bring entrepreneurship into the schools. I started Singularity University with Peter Diamandis, with participation by Larry Page of Google and support from Google and NASA. And the key thing there is innovation, having the students self-organize into teams and take on world challenges like hunger or food or building housing for the developing world using three-dimensional printers and things like that. And the best way to learn, even if your project doesn't succeed, is to learn by doing. That's how I learned everything I know, is from the projects that I've done from a young age. And we should bring that into high schools and junior high schools. First of all, don't give kids time. The idea of education is to keep them so busy that they don't get into trouble. In fact, they have no time to do these creative projects. And then you also need mentoring and some resources. It shouldn't just be an afternoon extracurricular activity. It should be a mainstay of education.
So you think that young people should just start iterating and doing things, not necessarily wait until they're 22, 23, 24, which is still very young, but...
I absolutely think we should bring entrepreneurship and doing projects. It doesn't have to be technical projects. It could be starting a dance company or a theater group or even writing a novel or a poem. And this should be a major part of education from a very young age. Even elementary school, play is a form of experimentation and innovation. So you can start really at toddlerhood. There's versions of this that are appropriate for every age.
What do you think about politics? I mean, should we, and there was the whole SOPA, PIPA stuff, a few weeks ago, and I was actually just talking to a senator who's here trying to push his Startup Act. Do you think that this can be done through government, or do you think the private sector is the best way, or some mix?
look at the tremendous political power of people organized through social networks. SOPA was just marching along, heading right towards sure passage. It was a bipartisan bill. Wikipedia and others stood up against it. It was killed in hours. So, I mean, who thought, gee, Wikipedia is an enormously politically powerful organization? And it just kind of flexed its muscles for an instant. So we're seeing the power of people organizing through decentralized communication. I wrote about this in the 80s, that the Soviet Union would be swept away by the then emerging social network of early forms of email and teletype machines and fax machines. People thought that was nuts, that the Soviet Union, a mighty superpower, would be swept away. But that's exactly what happened in that 1991 coup against Gorbachev. And we've seen the effect ever since. And it's not just political democracy. If a woman walks into her doctor's office with a chronic disease, she's part of a powerful community of people that have that condition. She not only knows everything about it, probably more than the doctor, but these groups are organizing both for political action. If they see something that's not getting enough attention or is being thwarted by the FDA, they will organize politically, and they're actually now solving the problem. You have a group of 1,000 or 1 million people that have a disease. They've got the motivation and now the skills and the collaborative problem-solving tools to solve that problem.
And this dissemination of information is really interesting and it's undeniable, but at the same time that this has happened, you know, actual capital resources have, you know, the gap between the rich and the poor has gotten even bigger in this country. Do you have any thoughts about how, I mean, is it important for us to even that playing field a little bit more, or does that not matter in this scheme of moving toward the singularity?
Well, I don't think that's true.
Okay.
First of all, we measure a dollar as being worth a dollar, despite the fact that a dollar today you can buy $1 million of information technology circa only 20 years ago. This is actually worth actually $1 trillion circa 1970
Yeah.
in terms of computation and communication. Now you can say, okay, it's just true of these gadgets and communication. It's also true now of biological technologies, which are becoming information technology. In the world of physical things, now that we can turn information files into physical products with three-dimensional printers, and those are progressing exponentially, ultimately you'll be able to print out all the things you need, and there'll be a lot of open source forms of knowledge where you can print out high-quality clothing or food and have the things you need. That doesn't mean the end of the economy. We'll still be buying proprietary forms of information. Look at, for example, music or movies or books today. There's millions of each of those things for free, and you probably still spend money to buy those products. In fact, those industries are doing fine, but you can actually have a very good time with free versions. It'll be the same thing as ultimately information provides all of the resources of life, and people are better off today. People really forget what things were like. I have some dramatic animated graphs that show the progression of health and wealth and amount of education per child across the world, and it's gotten steadily better for the last 200 years. Life expectancy was 37 in 1800, and you can read Thomas Hobbes how horrible human life was just a couple of centuries ago.
Huh. So even though maybe these hedge fund managers have zillions of dollars, they're, you know, someone like me is maybe closer in quality of life to someone like them than we'd ever be previously in history.
We have a very broad middle class. The differences in lifestyle are pretty subtle for the most part. We have actually much better information about what's wrong. So when somebody is injured, or there's a war in Fallujah, or a medical crisis in Nigeria, we hear about it. Maybe we can't always solve it right away, so people think the world's getting worse. It's not like these problems didn't exist before. World War I, you know, maybe you read about a battle in the newspapers, and that was a small elite. 19th century, there's no information. We have much greater immediacy of understanding what's wrong with the world. So people think things are getting worse because they hear about problems more and more often, but that's really just because our information is better.
And You talked about 3D printing, and I think, Singularity University, there are so many projects there that are working with things like this and high performance computing and these really exciting big ideas. But then if you look at a website like maybe TechCrunch, we write a lot about these small consumer apps. Do you feel like it's a difference in what the media covers, or do you think there are just more people going after these small consumer apps versus these big ideas, and how can maybe we get more entrepreneurs interested in these big ideas?
Well,
kind of a big question.
I mean, there are millions of apps. I mean, there's the better part of 1 million apps just for the iPhone, and there's software of all kinds, and some are little variations, and some are in fact very clever, and some have AI. I mean, how about Siri for the iPhone? People are talking to their phones and getting pretty satisfactory results. But when I ask people, they go, well, I said something and didn't quite understand what I was saying. And it reminds me of the joke about the woman whose dog plays chess. And and people say, aren't you amazed your dog plays chess? And he goes, yeah, but his end game isn't very good. So it's pretty amazing people are actually talking to their phones in normal English, or in fact, it's in other languages too. And that's only going to get better. Or Watson, which actually sat down figuratively and read 200 million pages of natural language documents, including all of Wikipedia. That's how it got its knowledge. It was not hand-coded by the scientists. So we have computers now that can deal pretty impressively with natural language. That's a major milestone. And there's so many other breakthroughs. The Google self-driving cars, okay, that's not a mainstream technology, but that is coming. There's a high level of confidence now, and we're also using these tools to find cures for diseases now that we understand actually how diseases work in terms of their information flow.
And also when you talk about information and all of us using these apps and contributing to them, how do you think about the concept of privacy and personal data, and where's that going?
Privacy is not in as bad a shape as people sometimes make out. It's true it's more complicated. It used to be enough just to close the blinds in your bedroom. Now we have 1,000 virtual windows on our lives, and we have to be mindful of that. But there are technologies underlying privacy, and there are technologies underlying invasion of privacy. So encryption actually preserves privacy. Decryption invades it. Turns out that encryption is doing better than decryption. It used to be thought that quantum computing would forever destroy encryption and end privacy. And it turns out that quantum computing doesn't really work. But quantum encryption, which is unbreakable, does work. So it's a complicated technical discussion, but we have means of preserving privacy. We have to develop the social compacts and the rules, and that's complicated. But I actually don't run into that many people who say, oh, it's horrible, my life was just destroyed by the fact that my privacy was compromised. Now, we do read these stories. Some teenager whose photographs inadvertently ended up on the internet or something. I'm not saying there isn't a problem, but I don't run into that many people that tell me their lives were wrecked by that. So we do need new rules. People are actively concerned about it. There actually are laws to protect privacy. It is really recognized as a right, and I think we'll end up okay on it, but that's not a pat answer. I mean, we have to work at it.